Then the,
Oh, wait, he's coming back.
I don't know. There used to be. I'm not sure if it's there anymore.
I could check, but then my fault would be in there and they would call the meeting. I'm not doing that again. I was mortified.
Mr. Salmon, do you think we'll have to adjourn and do this next week?
We're back?
All right, we're back online. Let's go quickly.
Action.
It's getting late. The system is failing us. Mr. Tate, do you have any comments, sir? Or I forgot where we were. If you don't, that's fine. Were you done, Mike? I'm sorry.
I was just trying to clarify so that January 28th is a date where someone in Bridges could come back to school if they're K through 6, and it's also an opportunity for someone K through 6 where they could enter Bridges.
So the way the Bridges program works is a student, it's basically asynchronous learning with opportunities for some live sessions, but primarily it is asynchronous learning. So a student could enter at any time, and then the Bridges teachers and administrators would ascertain, working with the school district, what courses would that student need, and give us a sense of where they were. They'd do some initial assessments or screening to try to figure out where the student was. And then they plan a course of instruction based on the time that the student enters and how long they're going to be in to give the student and their family a sense of basically how many lessons should you be completing and what pace should you be at to reach the end of the year or the end point.
So that's a yes? I'm just trying to provide a clear thing.
Yes, if they could go into the program at that time.
If we approve to. Correct. Yeah. Right. Dr. Thorwart.
A couple of points here, because I think we're missing in our quest to accommodate everybody some just basic logistics here. It's not the same Council Rock program. It doesn't go at the same pace. A kid that goes in midway, we don't know where that lands in Bridges. So if you sign up for it at the end of January, it's going to take these teachers a couple of weeks to figure out, right? I mean, days, weeks.
Days, I'm not sure how many weeks, but yeah, it's going to take a little time.
But even when they do, they're on a different trajectory than every kid that's still in school. There's a reason why we said we didn't want you to go in and out of it. And it's because it's, again, not educationally sound. If you want to open it up to parents who are nervous now and want to start January 28th, I would say then you have to stay there for the end of the year. I mean, I'm not doing the bouncing because it's not educationally, it's not nice for the kids who are back in school, because when those kids come back, we have to do the same shuffle on our end. I think we're missing just logistics. This is not as simple as, you go here today and go here over. There's a reason why we're picking these end dates. And there's a reason why we said whole marking periods. I mean, at this point, listen, you can be vaccinated whether you want to or not. As Dr. Elliott pointed out, you're back in school now. So if there's serious concerns, then I take the year, take the rest of the year. I'm happy to offer it, but take it as the whole, take the rest of the year. So that's that. I just want to make sure we're mindful of, this is not as simple as, the program is not the same. You can't come in and out and land at the same spot, classroom or not.
I was under the assumption that if you did, you are taking the rest of the year, that you're not bouncing back and forth. Like, you sign up for this, you're committed from January 28th until June 18th or whatever the last day of school is. That's what I meant.
I can embrace that.
Dr. Oat, any comment on it, or just since we're clarifying?
I would agree that, if the board decides that they want to open this opportunity either for these students or they want to open it for other students, those families and those students need to make a commitment. And as the board, our original direction was to allow those families at the beginning of the year to come back at any time they wanted, based on how the situation changed with the pandemic. That could be something we could consider if the board wished to do that. However, I think we need to give some clear parameters of, what we're expecting.
Thank you. Ms. Bally?
So I would like the board to offer that option for the families to start the bridge program. And I wanted to hear Dr. Elliott, because I think the administration would be best to tell us from an educational perspective whether they would be okay to come back after, say, 2 or 3 months, or they should stay in the program. So I don't feel that I know enough to make that call, but I believe the administration should be able to. I don't know if it's going to be a case-by-case basis or it's going to be a universal rule for everything. The other point I want to make, that I would really appreciate if the administration could offer the one way for the people that have to stay home, and if we can extend it not only to someone who tested positive, but maybe include cases where someone who is exposed has to stay home, or the family is under severe restrictions. So, and again, I don't know if we can create a rule for everybody, or it can be a case-by-case basis that the administration can give us like a heads up. But definitely the one way for sure, if you can make it happen.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Mr. Aldago, please.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. I guess we have rules in place, and the deadline was January 28th. I'm in favor of just keeping the original rules that we have in place. I think that we're not changing anything. I believe if we go and let people go into this program, if they want to come back to school, we're not going to shut the door on them. They're going to get their attorney, and they're going to be allowed back in school, unless Rob Cox can tell me that I'm wrong.
I would prefer to not address that issue in public.
That's fine, and understand that that's, you can't.
I do think that if the board wants to, as this is the point that Dr. Thorward and others were making, if the board wants to set a rule that a family who enrolls in the Bridges program on the 28th going forward has to remain in that program for the rest of the year, it can do that. There may be, from time to time, a real need for an exception that the district would have to evaluate. But I do believe that the board can set that parameter.
Sure, so exceptions are a good thing, and we make them all the time. I thought the rule, the way we had it, if you were going to say bounce back once, we can't do it re-enroll, I could probably get behind that. So you could go into Bridges, you decide you don't like it, you can come back, but we're really not going to let you back in again, so that you don't get that bounce back that we originally were talking about, versus saying, if you do this, we're going to give you a hard time about coming back to our school if it doesn't work out for you. I don't want to do that, but you guys can make your own choices.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else? Mrs. McKay?
Thank you. First of all, I want to say I was really pleased to see the initial number of, I think you said, Dr. Elliott, 48, 49 students come down to, 14. Really pleased to see those numbers coming down, because I'm a firm believer that our students belong in Council Rock School with Council Rock curriculum, Council Rock teachers. Having said that, I really do understand and sympathize that there are families that have genuine, legitimate concerns and needs which prevent them from putting their kids in our classrooms at this time. So I would be supportive of continuing the program. I'm a little bit mixed on the idea of whether to limit it to those students currently in the program, or offer it up and open it up to others. Personally, I from my experience in the classroom, I think it would be very disruptive for kids to be coming back between now and June. Disruptive for the children. It would be hard for them, I think, to readjust. It would be difficult for teachers to assess them and place them appropriately, design instruction for them. So I'm really kind of torn between that, but I think I would prefer to see the program extended until June, certainly for those initial families and perhaps for others, but with a commitment to remain in the program until June.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Oh, Dr. Thorward, I'm sorry.
If we did what Mrs. McKee just said and said open it up to others and keep them there till June, if we said we want that, we can want anything we want. Can you deliver that is my next question.
I would need some clarification of the scope of, are we talking K through 6 that we're doing this? We'd need to circle up with the rest of the administrative team and think about how we go about making this open for people. Do we do another registration link? We need to look at the impacts of that on how we're taking attendance and just kind of wrap our head around some of the logistical things to figure out what would our timeline be for when we could theoretically start this and provide that opportunity for those students.
And like, again, we can want anything we want, but sooner or later it has to happen. How about for the kids that are currently in it? That extension is just continuing, right?
For the kids that are currently in, it would be as simple as me contacting, first letting those families know that they can remain in if they choose to, and then contacting Bridges to let them know we're extending and they're welcome to stay in.
Mr. Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. I think it's a good idea, to put it simply, for us to continue the program for those families that are in it currently. If the original rules, if you will, when Bridges was offered was that sign up now, this is your opportunity, there won't be an opportunity at mid-year, I don't think we need to change that rule. I would have a reservation about doing that. So Dr. Elliott, what was the original understanding for parents, please? Was it, this is your one chance?
The original understanding for those 43 to 44 parents or students, so representing not 44 families, who opted to register and attend through Bridges, was that I'll clarify, we didn't know when the vaccine was going to be available. So trying to set some parameters in August around what that would look like, we wanted to make sure that when that vaccine was available or when those families felt comfortable coming back, that they had that option to do so. Obviously, we're in a different place than we were in August. If I may also add, I did reach out to these families for some feedback, and the majority of those that remain indicated that if Bridges would remain an option, it would be extremely likely that they would remain through the end of the year. There were a few that weren't certain that they would want to remain to the end of the year, but a good number said they would most likely want to remain through the end of the year.
Okay. Please, Mr. Hickey.
When the agreement was made with the 14 or 16 families that are currently in there, if they elect to stay, do they have the option, or did they have the option to come back whenever they wanted? Like for example, if one of these families that are currently in there, if in March they say, hey, I want to come back, was that allowable by the district?
The way we set the parameters to this point was that they could come back at any time. I would, look to the board for some direction on that. If, technically those 18 students, their spot in their in-person Council Rock classroom is still there. We are holding that spot for them. So if that is the direction from the board, we could, if we choose it's these families, we could continue that practice of, if at such time you feel comfortable returning, we will allow you to return. We may, depending on the time of year, want to have some conversations with them about, let's think about, is this the best time for you to return because of, maybe what's happening, for example, in April when we're administering the PSSA, maybe that's not the time you want to come back from the Bridges program. But again, that's something that, we could definitely have conversations about.
Good. I got a question. I don't know, Mr. Sanko, Dr. Elliott. Do we have a sense at K-6 how many families are not coming to school because none of the things in place work for them?
So we know the kids who are coming to school. We know the students who have left and gone to a cyber charter or a private school. We know the students in the Bridges program that Dr. Elliott just spoke about. We do have some, on occasion, we do have families that have decided to keep their kids home for a couple days or a week or whatever because of what's going on in their own household with their own independent needs. But we really have an accounting of all of our kids and where they are.
I'm sorry, we do? Is that what you said?
We do. We have an
So
accounting.
are any of those kids hitting the threshold of absences that if they have to make a decision legally to get back to school?
Yeah, so we keep attendance every day. It's required here, and we also have to report that in our PIMS reporting to PDE. So that's why I'm saying we have an accounting of all of our students. So for example, a student who's in the Bridges program, we keep attendance on them through our ISDS department, just like a student that physically walks into one of our buildings each day. Students that go to a cyber charter school, their attendance is not kept by us or somebody that is in a different private school.
So yeah, so my concern is still those families are just not comfortable coming to our school, and I don't know if they'll ever be comfortable in a brick and mortar building anytime soon. Now, if we're going around the room, I'm for whatever makes the most sense. And the only question I would have is, at this point, the kids that did come back during the beginning sense or the beginning couple months, did we evaluate them when they came back to find out how far off or in front were they than our kids that are already in school? It's probably a very small sampling anyway, but I'm kind of trying to get a sense. Is it that much? I know it's different, but how much different is it? Is it flexible enough? I don't know.
As we would do with any student who is joining a classroom, whether they're a move-in or in this case, our students coming back from Bridges, our teachers would always, gather some data, do some assessments to get a sense of where the student is and what their needs are. I can't speak specifically to, do we notice any difference in where they are as a learner relative to where our students are at this point. I do not have that data, but we do evaluate, and then we have services and provide them with any support they need, or the teachers work with them and try to make sure that we're helping the students be successful.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, and the key is that we're holding those seats when they're in Bridges in that classroom. Yes. So Bob, to your point, if that was something the board wants, that seat's there. So that's an important thing. Mr. Roosevelt, please.
Just coming back, Mr. Senko, can you ballpark, if you're not comfortable, that's fine, but can you ballpark the number of students that we're talking about that might be up against their 10 days that are not coming back for whatever reason?
No, I couldn't answer that question without looking, and we keep daily attendance, so it could vary from day to day, and we keep that K-12, so I really don't have an answer for that at this point. I'll get it for you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Dr. Thorwart?
I want to make sure Dr. Elliott and their team has direction here. Do you have enough?
I'm not exactly sure that
No.
I know what we're doing.
My sense is there's generally a sense to keep it going. I think Mr. Hickey's brought up going in and out of it. I think that would be the only sticking. Mr. Rodago, were you?
I'd just say steady as she goes and extend it out with the same
For
policy.
the current people, not open it. So the choices are continue it, let me get,
Well, I just want to know if the current policy is someone could get into it now if they wanted to. I mean, let's say
That's what we're-
a week ago, a month ago, could someone have gotten into the bridges anytime during the year?
Currently, no.
Okay. So we would, this would be different then. This would be, I could go along with just keeping it the way it is.
natural reopen and extension
Right.
of what we currently do. The only question that was brought up by Mr. Hickey was in and out as they see. Right? Am I being correct?
No, my question was, if you sign up for the bridges now, if you're new, you make a commitment
To June.
to June. The question that I asked was for the current students. I didn't know if they could have, the agreement that they, what they agreed to in September, could they have left at any time? Because you're telling new kids, nope, you have to stay till June, but the kids who are currently in there, no, you can come back next month if you want. Where you have two sets of rules.
Correct. Depending upon the direction that the board wants us to take, the current students, as it was presented to them back in August, they could return at any time they wanted. If the board decides to open it to other students and decides that we want them to commit to through June, unless we change for those 18 that are currently in and say, if you choose to stay in, you are now committing to the end of the year, that would make it parallel for both of those groups, rather than having one set of guidelines for one group and one set of guidelines for another group.
May I hear? The other thing is
18
these,
kids don't have a right to be in the program as of January 28th anyway, right?
Exactly.
Terminates. So,
2.0 almost.
so, and then that leads me to my main point, though, is that whatever the board decides to do going forward, whether it's the 18 families that are currently in it, or it's 18 plus, whoever, the families that decide to enter the program in the new enrollment, the rules should be the same.
yeah, if this ends on January 28th, as it is, we're voting on a new system here.
That changes everything.
Okay.
You sign up, you stay.
Mrs. Marcel, you look perplexed.
I just wanted to say that I'm good with basically starting this, like a new program, keeping the 18, but starting it, going till June. I'm good with that. Whatever that's going to be called, that's what I'm good with.
Mr. O'Doggo?
Just to clarify, Dr. Elliott, so if somebody, we had an open enrollment, we had a certain amount of people, 18 are left, 18 families. We weren't offering a second round of enrollment after that date. So to repeat the process, we could do another open enrollment, keep the rules the same as they were the first half. I think that's what, was that what you were saying? To keep the rules the same for a second window of enrollment, or just the rules the same between the two if there's new enrollees versus the existing?
Legally, the rules for, once you're in through the end of the year should be the same for the first cohort of 18 and then any new cohort that enrolls.
Okay.
Mr. Tate, please.
I believe I'm in agreement with what Ms. Marcel proposed, but we've talked about a lot of different options. So let me just simply express what I support and see if that's where we're headed, which is extending the program for the 18 currently in it, with the agreement and the expectation that they continue to the end of the year, not reopening it to additional families. I'm not in favor of reopening. I am in favor of extending the 18 through the end of the school year.
Okay, so the option that Mr. Tate just said is extending it for the current enrollment only. No additional folks in there.
I agree with Mr. Tate.
My suggestion was allowing people to enroll, but through the end of the year, so we don't have switching. So basically, because we're like restarting this contract, we're allowing the 18 to decide what they want to do, opening it up to others, but everyone stays through the end of the year. That's, sorry, just to clarify.
Mr. O'Dago?
I'm close, but we're still going to hold that spot for them, so we're not going to hold the spot anymore. See, I think it puts people in a really rough position that want to do this and may have second thoughts as the environment changes, but that's just me. I'd like to keep it, you already know where I'm at, and I'm.
No, just state for
Okay,
the
I'll be,
record. then.
okay, basically, then I can agree with Ms. Marcel in opening it up, but there's going to be that same, it's basically the same as the beginning of the year. We're just opening up a new enrollment period for anybody. That's pretty simple.
Okay, I have two on each side of this. Ms. Pally?
I think I agree with Mr. Hidalgo, so we can open it to new families for the second semester, and they have one chance. If they leave, they cannot come back, which is a similar rule that they had in the first semester.
Remember, this is K-6 only. Ms. McGee, just for clarification purposes, you want me, I can come back to you if you're not, yeah. Gentlemen, anybody want to jump in?
This is a very important and significant educational decision. Whether you have your kid come to school, which is resounding that we all support that. We want your kids in school. We want to educate them. If you don't support that, if you're uncomfortable with that, like the 18 families that are currently there, I think that this should be extended for the 18 that are in. It sounds like this is a new enrollment for those Re-18. They're going to be the first 18 that are coming up. So that's fine. I think for anybody else, I would not recommend that they do this. It doesn't sound like it's sound educational practice, but I also don't think that we're talking about a tremendous number. So if Mr. Sanko can get that, and those families can really evaluate that decision, I'm okay with opening it up to some new families to come in, and then all the 18 plus the new are under the very clear understanding that this is not a revolving door. They're not coming back, and this is just to the end of the year. That's, I could get behind that, but I want to make this very clear that this is a very important educational decision, and that I hope that everybody's taking that very seriously as far as to not come to Council Rock. I think we had some great response. We had 40, 50 kids that have reduced down to 18. So that says a lot about those families that decided to come back to Council Rock because the education was better. So I'm hoping that we don't have too many that go, but if a couple have to go, if they're up against a thing, that's fine. I could get behind that. But yeah, we're not doing a revolving door.
I just want to clarify something in case any of these 18 families are listening to the meeting. We've been talking and talking about enrollment and a new enrollment period. If they are currently in the program and we decide to continue it, those 18 students, not 18 families, those 18 students do not have to do anything. They are already in. It will just be, me reaching out to them and also contacting Bridges to let them know they're continuing. So I just want that to be clear so they're not confused and thinking they're going to have to re-register or redo something.
The difference being that if they continue, they're in it till June is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I just had a conversation with Mr. Cox. We need clarification. I need clarification on this. And Dr. Thorward started it. Can we do this? If this number blows up to 300 kids when we open enrollment, if I want to use that term, open enrollment, is that something Bridges can handle? Is that something the district can handle? What does the lift on that look like? If you could even answer it.
One of the things that we would need to consider is there's a cost with this. Now, granted, it's not the same cost as the pupil cost for someone who goes to a cyber charter school. So for a semester with Bridges, it's about $2,200 and some change. So if we would have 300 students who would decide to enroll in Bridges, I'm not going to do the napkin math at the moment. Obviously, that's going to be an expense that we're going to incur as a district. Currently, our fees that we've paid to Bridges amount to about $80,000 for so far this year. Well, started out as 44 kids and has dwindled down, but that's been the fee. So I think that if the board is asking for us to do an open enrollment and have a registration period again, that's going to create some challenges. If you're talking about 300 kids, that creates some significant staffing implications for our schools. Given the numbers that we have that are currently in the program, and knowing, while we don't have specific numbers, I know that the number of our families who are not comfortable being in school is not 300 students. It's a small number.
It's a bad number, but I'm just hypothetical.
Yes, thank you. I think I would want to be able to meet with our cabinet team and administrators and talk through some of the logistics of that implication. And I wouldn't expect Dr. Sanko at this point to have any idea about any staffing implications if students would leave Council Rock classrooms and go to Bridges. I just don't know that we have that data readily available this evening to talk about.
Thanks, Dr. Elliott. If I could just jump in there, we would not know that until we had the open enrollment. I think the other thing that is fair to point out is that with this enrollment, if we mirror what we did in August, there is an implication in the K-12 department for unenrolling students. And that takes time and logistics to create the enrollment time and then pull that data, withdraw students from our records. So stuff that you wouldn't see necessarily sitting in a second grade classroom or a fourth grade classroom. There's a lot of lifting to do in the DS department, as well as with Mrs. Ailing, the secretary of the K-12 department, as well as the building level administrative assistants.
So I'm starting to hear no. It's a little more of a lift and a little more, because it's the 13th and we're 15 days away from this at this point. So I'm going to amend what I want now, and that's basically extend it for the 18 kids, because that's the right thing to do for them, and stop. I can do that. Which is what Mr. Tate said originally, and I see Mrs. McKee nodding her head. Just we'll do right by the 18 kids that are in there if they want to stay, and the rest of them. I mean, we want you in school. I mean, this is where we want to be. So I see 3 nods, 4 nods. Oh, okay.
I had a question before you count me anyway. So Mr. Cox, could we leave the 18 to move forward and then almost have like a reverse exception policy? Like if there is a family that individually wants to consider Bridges, so we don't do like a large open enrollment. It's more just that if there is an attendance situation, or there's something that Dr. Sanko and Dr. Elliott, like somehow that there's a way so that if there is a very small number of students that need to be offered this, is it like, can we do that without creating the administrative open enrollment, but just have it as this is an option potentially to help address a student's needs?
I would say so, Ms. Marcel, yes.
Wouldn't that fall under Chuck's bailiwick? I mean, at that point, it's...
There might be other reasons for it. But I think that the district, a school district, generally speaking, if it is making a decision based on a specific student's needs, usually it's on safe ground. I've been thinking about this as the board has had its conversation. I do think it can essentially decide to grandfather the 18 families that are currently in it. So I think that that's an option. And Ms. Marcel, I think I'd say the answer to your question is yes. There are a lot of novel questions these days, and that sort of is one. But I think the board can. I think that's within the board's discretion.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. I obviously want to hear from my board colleagues, but I feel comfortable with that. It seems like perhaps a better option instead of having an open enrollment, but still providing the opportunity so we don't feel like we're locking someone out and, keeping them from exploring that.
Mr. Harris, how many kids do we have in cyber charter now, and what are we paying? Off the top of your head?
We have an allocation of approximately $2.5 million in the budget for charter school in total. And by last count, I believe Ms. Ailing provided somewhere in the neighborhood of 130 students in charter total.
So if we lose more kids to cyber charter, it would be prorated for the rest of the year, I believe, correct?
That's correct. And to Dr. Elliott's point, the total cost for the year is for Bridges is approximately 1/3 of the cost.
Correct.
For regular education.
Which is why we went that road in the beginning. Okay.
And the answer to your first question was $660,000.
What was my first question?
300 times 2,200.
It's getting late. No, that's an important thing for the new board members too, is that if none of this works, their opportunity is, that's what I keep asking for. What do we do for those folks? So those numbers have jumped off the pages of us for the last 2 years. Cyber charter costs in general. Pally, are you here with us on this? Or
I like what Ms. Marcel suggested, because this way we don't tax the system, and at the same time we have an open window for families that need a different option.
Mr. Hickey, Mr. Roosevelt.
Yeah, I'm okay. I've had a change of heart with this. I'm okay with Ms. Marcel's suggestion.
You're making me keep track here. So we have 1, 2, 3 for Mrs. Marcel, 1, 2, 3 specifically for Dr. Thorwart's. Stop, nothing else.
It's the same thing.
Are you good with it?
Listen, I just want, if a parent needs this and they're not in it, they need to go to the administration and work out a fair and appropriate education. And I want out of it at this point. We should not be deciding what that is.
Dr. Thor, that's a good approach legally. I try to stay out of the policy decisions that this board makes, but Dr. Thorwart's approach there from a legal perspective makes a lot of sense. The administration is well suited to determine whether a family should be allowed to enroll in Bridges at some point other than on January 28th.
Okay. Is that good? We're good? Yeah. I think you're good.
Just to be clear for the, for the 18, I want to make sure I'm clear. So these 18 students, are we going to require them to stay through they must now commit to the end of the year?
We just told you had whatever
Okay.
you needed to do.
All right.
That's
so-
what you do whatever you need to do.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
We good?
We're good unless we're.
No, we don't need a motion.
No, I think from what I'm hearing from the board is it's directing the administration to allow the 18 families currently in the Bridges program to continue through the end of the year. And to the extent families request exceptions to that general policy, the administration has discretion to decide them on a case-by-case basis. And if there's a member of the board who does not support that approach, I think you should let the administration know now. That's what I've tracked over the last half hour.
Mr. Odago?
And also the discretion to enroll any new students. Is that part of this? Yes, right? leaving it just, well, that, he just adding what he said, of course. Just adding to what he said.
All right, so we're good on this? Trying to move it along. Deal, K6, correct. The only other thing I want to make a quick comment on is the one-way, you want to call it one-way learning, Dr. Elliott? Dude,
One-way
Viewing.
temporary viewing.
temporary remote learning. What do you think time frame? I mean, it's might be a heavy lift. I mean, we do have technology in the building. What are you thinking? What do you need? Just a little more clarification for me.
I would ask, since, we've started exploring this and looking at what some of the neighboring districts are doing, if we can have some time and bring some details to the board at the January 27th Education Committee meeting. And that way, that gives us a little bit more time to put some things together, think about logistics, communication plan, how we're going to handle, just all the issues around that. And then that way, we can look to start it with the start of the second semester, which the second semester starts on January 31st, which is after the Education Committee meeting, if that seems like a reasonable timeline.
Okay, I don't know if that was mentioned during your presentation. Mr. Hickey.
I just want to thank you for bringing it to the attention of all of us. Something I wholeheartedly agree with. Like you said, the sooner the better if we can get this done. We want to educate the kids, but we also had to discuss at different meetings. If you're sick, stay home. Please don't come to school. And this is just another way to encourage, students to do that, and especially those on either end of the spectrum. I hear a lot of talk about, you have your students that are taking your AP courses that, they're afraid to miss any class. And at least this gives them an opportunity to view the class and take notes and, maybe try to do something about it. And if they're too sick to do it, they're not going to be able to do it anyway. But like I said, I think it's a great option for, to at least explore it. And if we can do this and pull this off in a timely manner, I'd be all for it.
Anybody else? Mr. Hidalgo, please.
We're going to move on to the next item, which is, was it 520?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the board if they would consider tabling it.
Oh, then I'll speak now because I've been waiting since August 16th to have this conversation.
August 16th. Okay.
Yes.
There we go.
All right. So back then, I had a lot of conversation when we were talking about not live streaming, and I've been trying to understand live streaming or come up with something that works for people for many different reasons. That one-way communication was a way to address that, and that was spoken about in the summer amongst some of us, that there was a way to address, to keep that going, to use the technology that we had paid all that money for, and have those cameras ready at a moment's notice. So in that this August meeting, which is interesting because I'm looking at the minutes, and the last thing I had asked on that date is that we we review the 520.1 policy at the August 26th education meeting, which was canceled, and September, October, November, December, here we are in January, and we're going to table it again. My point is, and it's the same point I made in August.
Joe, we're not going to table it. I said I'm going to suggest it. It doesn't mean we don't want to table it, just to be clear.
So
if you want to talk about it.
Let's go. I appreciate that because, as I said, it's been 5 months. The cameras are there. The technology's there. I understand the arguments or the concerns of the teachers and the administration and board members about how live streaming distracts, how those cameras are a concern to some people.
Joe, can I just interject for a second, just for clarification? 520.1 has nothing to do about what you're talking about.
Understand,
Okay,
but
520
I understand that.
Flexible days.
Right, but I wanted to bring it back to the agenda to be so that at time we could have the conversation about
all right.
live streaming. It was the segue into getting into the understanding that the live streaming is there, and it could be open at any time. With the technologically speaking, Matt Frederickson spoke to that on that night. So the reason why I wanted to bring it back to committee so that we could start talking about it in maybe a different way too, which we're trying to get to. And I'm glad to see the administration is finally making some way here, but I don't see why we didn't have this ready to go. As I said back then, have these arrows in our quiver, another tool to help when we needed it. And we needed it. We need it for the people that were saying, you can't come to school. So how do we make that work? And I'm happy to have that conversation. The reason why it's not another table agenda, is as close as I can get to having that conversation in public about it. But for some reason, I'm wondering why, if I asked for it in new business to be added, shame on me for not remembering, but it doesn't seem like it's anything anybody wanted to address till now. But as I said, I'm advocating for that one-way streaming like tomorrow. If you're sick, if you're out of school, it's an absence, but especially at the secondary level, it's very important. I said also give the teachers the discretion, to turn that camera on for people if they want to, and let them decide if it's maybe the bare minimum one way, so there's no expectation there. But a teacher should be able to check in and have the ability to work their classroom how they want and use that technology. I think that's the avenue. I wanted to make sure I gave my 2 cents that I want to give the teachers the discretion to run their classrooms the way they see fit. And again, maybe there's some fair and appropriate education guardrails or rules and policies to put in place so that we're not treating one set of students different than another. But I want to explore it, and it will be the end of the school year before we actually get it done. So I'm a little sad that we haven't done it a lot sooner, and that's my point.
Okay, thank you, sir. So now I'm going to go to B, which is a discussion and possible action on the 520.1 plan. The board would like to have it quickly. I don't have a problem with it. I am also not against tabling it at 11:15, and we have 7 people who would like to speak to the board. So I would open it up to the board for their comments on that.
I'm happy to table it.
Me too.
I just have a question. I believe it needs to be submitted. What's the timeline for that, Dr. Elliott?
Our 520.1 plan has already been submitted and approved by the state, so we're good to table the discussion.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody against it? Okay. All right, let's move to public comment. First one up, good evening, Vanessa Smith. You have 3 minutes to talk. Kids still may be up. You know, the whole, I've read it before. I'd be happy to read it again, but you've been here.
Not most kids.
Yeah.
All right.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Vanessa Smith. A few months ago, I found a book, Lawn Boy in Norse Library. Lawn Boy has an explicit sexual encounter between 2 fourth-grade boys. I wrote the board and was directed to speak to Dr. Elliott about my concerns. I was basically told that this book won an Alex Award for being appealing to young adults and that it would not be removed from the library. I think the first thing wrong with that statement is the fact that we think children are young adults. Adults are 18 and older. Young adults would be 18 to 20-somethings, not children. We need to stop treating children as they are adults who can handle adult situations. In the book, Michael, the main character, is explaining this encounter to his friend Nick. Nick was frantic and uncomfortable and telling his friend to stop sharing. The author used an adult character who couldn't even handle his friend telling him about this encounter, yet we think children should be able to handle reading about it. A group of parents are coming to you tonight because we believe that we need policies in our libraries. There are many inappropriate books in our libraries. If a movie with a certain rating or a certain content is to be shown to our children, it needs to have parental consent for them to watch it, yet they can take out these books that have very explicit sexual encounters, drugs, alcohol, rape, child abuse, molestation, physical abuse, and much more. We think there should be a committee of staff and parents who decide which books are inappropriate. We are not asking you to ban these books. We are asking that you have parental consent for these books to be taken out by children. We ask that a simple email goes out explaining why the book is on the consent list and that parents can decide if their children can read it or not. The good thing about this is if they choose to allow their children to read this, they will know what the book is about and they can talk to their children about these adult situations. Here's an example of one of 50 in Perks of Being a Wallflower that is at North-South Holland Middle on pages 30 and 31. When Charlie's brother was 16, he threw a party because his parents were out of town. He told Charlie that he had to stay in the room. A drunk boy and girl came in the room and asked if they could use it. He said to them that he needed to stay in the room. They closed the door and started kissing very hard. After a few minutes, a boy's hand went up the girl's shirt and she started protesting. Come on, Dave, what? The kid is in the room. It's okay. The boy kept working up the girl's shirt, and as much as she said no, he kept working it. After a few minutes, she stopped protesting, and he pulled off her shirt, and she had a white bra on with lace. I honestly don't know what to do at this point. Pretty soon, he took off her bra and started kissing her breasts. And then he put his hand down her pants, and she started moaning. I think they were
30
both very
seconds.
drunk. He reached off to take off her pants, but she cried really hard and asked him, and he pulled down his own instead. Please, Dave, no. The boy just talked soft to her about how good she looked, and she grabbed his penis and with her hands and started moving it. I wish I could describe using nicer words, but that's the way it was. After a few minutes, the boy pushed the girl's head down and she started to kiss his penis. She was still crying. Finally, she stopped crying.
That's 3 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, this was basically a rape scene that I just read to you that is in Holland Middle School book. I'm just asking for parental consent.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up is it Egel? E-G. Okay. Next up is Dawn DeLuigi. Good evening. You have 3 minutes, please.
All right, my name is Dawn DeLuigi. I'm from Northampton Township, and I am talking about the same kinds of things that Vanessa just spoke about. I sent all of you a letter prior to this meeting. I'm not going to read the explicit sexual content of the book that I am referring to, Out of Darkness. However, our schools are excusing and purchasing these books with our tax dollars. Many of these books, and there's a list of over 65 in our school right now, inappropriate, sexually explicit, in our libraries in the district. Of course, that's part of the curriculum, and I know that. I believe after reading several, and many of these books, they attempt to normalize underage sex, promote deviant behavior, and desensitize children to a sexual lifestyle, some including very blatant pornography. What I sent to you describes over 60 issues, and it is quite disturbing. And I am no prude, and I read those, and I could not believe it. It's in middle school, Holland Middle School, and in North and South. It's driving a wedge, literally, between children, their parents. It's diminishing the role of family, and it's just the first step, in my belief, to pornographic addiction, which may be what its intent is. Unfortunately, when the librarians order these books, I don't think that they are always aware of what's in the books. They get a little blurb, they get a catalog, and there it is. They don't read the book sometimes, and when they do, like me, and I was a reading specialist, I never saw a lot of it. The newer books are getting worse. And when I say getting worse, I'm not talking about Shakespeare. I'm not talking about things that, we've all seen throughout the years. I'm talking about the newer age, more woke community. I'm just asking that you look through these, stop our schools within this district from attacking family values by allowing access to the books without guidelines and restrictions, just like you do with movies. I believe that these books should not be banned. I don't believe in book banning, but our goal is to reinstate within our schools a clear and defined age-appropriate guideline, along with definitive instructions, parent waivers, if
30 seconds.
possible, and maybe the physical placement of these books. I implore you, bring your attention to these books. Ask the librarians what kinds of books are in their shelves, and do it before it's too late. And if you like challenges, I dare you to read them. It was appalling to me, and not much surprises me these days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up is Wendy King.
Hi.
Good evening.
I'm looking at it a little differently. I think if somebody wants to buy a smut book, they can go to Amazon, they can go to Barnes and Nobles. That's their responsibility, not our schools. I read some of these. I don't want my kids reading these books. God forbid if they get a hold of them. That's on the library's head. But there's no reason. And I don't care who won what. Doesn't matter to me. But some of them, and some of them for the younger kids, like the sex ed books, I don't want them teaching my 6th grader to masturbate. I don't want it. It's not going to happen. They want to buy the book. They want to educate their kids. Go to Barnes & Nobles, Amazon. I think they should be out of the school. So I look at it differently.
Thank you. Next up is Jennifer Gessner.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Jennifer Gessner from Holland. I got into this, looking into the book stuff after a book was presented into a 7th grade reading class at Holland Middle School. And I had a conversation with one of the principals there. And having a teaching background, I understand where he's coming from. He quoted, he gave me the philosophy of what one of the librarians had shared, that and I went and researched it further because I wanted to gain a further understanding of it. And so back in 1990, there is a, I forget her title, but her name was, Rudin Sims Bishops. And her philosophy of books is like comparing it to a mirror window and a sliding glass door. So back in 2008, parents stood here and asked for permission for movies, for parental permission to be seen in the classroom. We are asking that for the books. If a teacher can go into the library, in any of our libraries in the school district, and they can pull a book, and the book can be on the unapproved list, but still bring it into the classroom, that is still a teachable moment. Anything that you bring into the classroom is teachable. And if a teacher doesn't have control of what the conversation is, that conversation can go in a direction that loses that teachable moment, that maybe that was the original thought. So like Vanessa, like Dawn and Wendy, we just need more, like we need stakeholders from the community to kind of evaluate what's going on with the books. So today, I spent my entire day and I read this book. It's called Monday's Not Coming. And it's in Holland Middle School, and it's rated young adult. And this book was on in Virginia, the Loudon, their list, and the parents were really upset about it. They came to the board meeting and they read different, things from the book. I read the book and I actually fell in love with it. And I don't think I would let my 7th grader read the book, but I would allow my high schoolers,
30 seconds.
Senior, to read it. So if we had more parental controls, especially with a young adult book, I don't think this should be in Holland Middle School, especially with, I loved it for so many different reasons, from a learning difference, from what goes on in the inner cities. I fell in love with the characters. I wanted to help the characters, and it's like life-changing. So I would just allow parents to kind of have a view, and if you're gonna put guidelines for movies, they should also be in books, because books are more, oh my gosh, sorry. With books, your mind is going further. There's so many ways to interpret the books. And if you have it for movies, we need it for books. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. And last up is Alex. You signed it actually twice, sir, didn't you?
I guess I wanted to feel special, so I put my name twice.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the school board. I would like to turn your attention to the books that you had approved last year. I had brought it up to your attention multiple times, yet Never once saw you listing them up on the agenda for discussion. After some dedicated parents got involved in figuring out what other books are in our kids' schools, the books I've been referring to pale in comparison to the ones that have been brought to light. And what's worse is that Assistant Superintendent Elliott was made aware of these books, and not only did she turn a blind eye on all of it, she also stated that she had no intention of removing these kinds of books. So now, I'll read you a part of one of the books that should have never entered our schools. It is currently available in the libraries of both CR South and Holland Middle. This book has strong sexually explicit content and pedophilia. The book is called Beyond Magenta, Transgender Teen Speaks Out. Here's a quick excerpt. From 6 up, I used to kiss other guys in my neighborhood, make out with them, and perform oral sex on them. I liked it. I used to love oral, and I touched their you-know-whats. We were really young, but that's what we did. End quote. After hearing this, all of you should feel as speechless as I was when I first read this excerpt. If any of you think that this is appropriate to be available in our school libraries, then I don't think you belong on this board. This is inappropriate and unacceptable. What's worse is that these types of books are considered suitable by Assistant Superintendent Elliott. How can someone in that role think that these books are great reading material for our kids? This is so insidious, it's almost criminal. This board has an obligation to the community to get to the bottom of what types of books are being circulated in our schools. And those responsible for bringing in these inappropriate books into our children's schools should be immediately terminated, period. I hope the board will take this matter very seriously and will act quickly to eradicate this filth from our school district. Also, at the last meeting, I asked for clarification regarding what is social emotional learning, especially as it pertains to emotional and social well-being.
30 seconds.
Additionally, Strategy 3 in the strategic plan states forming a district diversity and inclusion team is one of those things, which to me sounds like CRT. I would love to have the public be provided the details of what it actually entails. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else in the audience? I know the sheet's removed. If not, any further comment from the board this evening? Seeing none, good evening. Go home and hug your kids. Good night.